Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to bring you guys the next video in my American Abroad series. Now today I want to share with you guys some life experiences that I've had and some mistakes I've made as an American who's moved from California to London. For those of you guys that don't know who I am, hello, hi, how's it going? My name's Anika and I'm an American living in London, and I've lived in London for the last 6 years, but I've actually lived abroad from California for over 10 years now. And in today's video, I want to share with you guys my biggest mistakes that I made when I first moved abroad and moved to London. Now, there are a lot of challenges that come along with moving abroad, and today I just want to get real with you guys and say it how it is and tell you guys the 5 mistakes I made when I first moved to London. Now, I have made tons of videos about moving abroad, being an American living in London, living abroad, how to move abroad if you are an American in London. If you guys want to check out any of those videos, or you guys want any life advice if you are looking to move to London as an American, I have made an entire playlist all about my experiences, and I will make sure to link it up in the cards for you right now, and of course down in the description of this video. But today, rather than sharing all of the joys and glories of living abroad and moving abroad, I want to share the mistakes I made. And I think in life, whenever you make a mistake, it is an opportunity to learn, it's an opportunity to grow, and it's an opportunity to share with others so you don't make the same mistakes that I made. So the first mistake I made, or the first big learning I had when I first moved to London, was understanding all of the British red tape. Now, what do I mean by British red tape? The main thing that comes to mind is opening a bank account and getting settled here in the UK. So when I moved here 6 years ago, getting a bank account or opening a traditional bank account with Lloyds or Barclays or HSBC required you to have an address in the UK. Now that's really tricky to do if you are an American or someone who is moving from abroad, because usually when you are coming from abroad, the first thing you want to do is open a bank account so then you could actually put money into that bank account so you can then put in a deposit for rent, but also start to live somewhere and also start to actually collect your paychecks into that British bank account. So one hard lesson that I learned when I first came abroad is that in order to even open a British bank account, you needed to have a proof of address. So you needed to actually have somewhere you were living. And at first I actually didn't know that. Banks were asking me for my British passport. They were asking me for my proof of address in London. They were also asking me for proof of employment or some sort of employment contract. Honestly, the list goes on, and they were asking me so many things about my life in London, even though I had only been living in London, or I had only flown into London about a week prior. And getting a British bank account is so important when you first move to London, because if you are trying to rent a flat by yourself like I was, or if you are working for a British company, you then need to have a bank account that they are able to pay into. And no matter how much money you have in a foreign bank account, you are going to need to have a British bank account. And again, you need to have that address. And it's so tricky in order to open a bank account if you don't actually have an address yet. Now, lucky for me, I have an aunt that lives right outside of London, and she allowed me to actually live in her house and use her address in order to then open a bank account. So I know I am pretty lucky in that sense. But for those of you guys that don't actually have family in London or don't know anyone living in London, it is tricky to actually then open that bank account. You are going to have to rely on someone helping you out or someone saying that you do have an address in the UK. But also another great thing that has happened since I've been abroad or been in London is there are now digital banks. So there are banks like Starling or Monzo or Revolut. And what's great about these banks is you don't necessarily have to have a proof of address to actually open up a bank account. You just have to have a proof of identity. So like a passport, a driver's license, something like that. So it's really great that the banking system has come a long way. So if you are moving to London and you don't have a proof of address or family or friends living here, I would recommend looking into digital banking. The second mistake I made when I moved to London was going the wrong way on the tube. Now, even after years of living in London, sometimes I get so turned around and confused by the tube routes as well as the bus routes. So I'd have to say, just make sure you download Citymapper or Google Maps onto your phone and just follow that, because usually they know way better than what you think you know. Even after years of living here, I sometimes end up going the wrong way on the tube. A great example, I was actually at Earl's Court Station, and for those of you guys that do know where that is, that station has multiple district lines running multiple different ways. And what I did is I got onto the platform, and my train that I needed to catch already had left the station. And I just thought, oh, another district line is coming in next, so I'll just jump onto that train. I jumped onto that train and it was actually going the wrong direction. And the one thing when you do get on a wrong train here in London is even if you go one stop or two stops the wrong way, it'll throw you back by like 30 minutes. So like if you have to get somewhere on time or you're trying to rush somewhere and you end up going the wrong way, it's gonna totally throw you off. But there are also tons of tube lines that don't end up running to the end destination that you think they are running to. The further and further you get out from central London, the tubes sometimes terminate before the final station, or sometimes they even skip stations altogether. So I'd say just keep Citymapper or Google Maps on your phone and follow that, because usually it knows best. And even after years of living here in London, I have made the rookie mistake of jumping on one train thinking, oh yeah, this train will get me right to where I need to go, and then suddenly I'm going the wrong way. The third mistake I made when I first moved to London was not registering for a GP or a dentist right away. So when you move to London as an American, if you are working here, you are covered under the NHS medical system, which means that you have coverage for all medical things and most dental things. But in order to get that coverage, you need to actually register for a general practitioner or doctor and a dentist. Now, I didn't register right away when I first moved here, mainly because when I lived in Germany before living in London, you can basically go to any doctor at any time and you didn't really have to register. But here in London, because the practices and the doctors are just busy and they just don't have enough space to take on new patients, you do have to register with your local GP or doctor or dentist in order to be seen. Now, when I first moved here, I was super busy and I totally forgot to actually register in my first 6 months of living here. I was just like, oh, it doesn't matter, I'll register whenever I need to register, it's not a big deal. But like I said, the NHS is the main way that a lot of people have medical insurance here in the UK, unless you have private health insurance, but that's a whole different conversation. But if you are getting coverage under the NHS, which everyone is covered under that, what happens is GPs and dentists get really busy and they get booked up and they're unable to take new patients. So let's say you have an emergency, like a dental emergency, or you need to see a doctor right away. If you're not actually registered with them, you can't actually go to that practice that day. And it's not hard getting registered. You just have to like call them up or email your local GP and let them know, hey, I'm a new patient. Are you taking any new patients? And then they usually just ask you to fill out a few forms and then you're registered. If they are overbooked or they cannot actually take any more patients, what ends up happening is you end up having to wait until they're able to actually take more patients, or you have to go find another GP. So my biggest tip is just find a GP right away. Otherwise, if you are waiting until you have an emergency, that GP might be booked up and you might not be able to actually be registered or see a doctor that day when you truly do have an emergency. Now, you can register at any GP, dentist, or doctor all across London, but obviously it's easier and more convenient if you do register for a GP near your living address or near your work address or near your school address. I personally try to find doctors and dentists near my house because it's just easier for me to go and travel there. But just find a doctor or dentist, ring them up or send them an email and say, hey, I'm new to the area, I'd like to register at your practice. And then usually they send you a form, you fill it out, and then you're registered, and then you don't have to think about it ever again. But if I were to rewind time and think back when I first moved to London, I would just say registering for your doctor right away just makes life so much easier for future appointments. If you have any future emergencies, if you ever need a dentist or doctor, just register for your GP. I made the mistake of waiting until I absolutely had to, and then I was just running around trying to find a GP. So just register right away. The fourth mistake I made when I first moved to London was thinking that the night bus was a good idea. And let me just step in here and let you know the night bus is never a good idea. 6 years later, I have learned just don't make the mistake I made and take the night bus. When I moved to London 6 years ago, there was no such thing as the night tube. The tube stopped running at midnight. And back then, Uber was also not a thing. I remember Uber was still going through all its regulatory issues, and they were having lots of debates of whether Uber should stay in London or leave, or they should only have black cabs. So overall, there was not really that many options if you were going out at night and you missed the last tube at midnight and then you were kind of stuck. There is, of course, the night bus, which is one thing I decided to try one time, and I'm like, hey, I went out for the night, I want to just get home, I can just take a bus home, no problem. I mean, most of the major bus lines in London get you to where you need to be. But like I said, a mistake that I will not be doing again. And yeah, you can take the bus. The night bus is totally acceptable and safe, but is it the best journey? Probably not, because to be honest, there are just a whole bunch of drunk people or just a whole bunch of people who are just a little bit shady, and you just don't want to put yourself in that situation if you don't have to. I would say a mistake I made that I probably won't be repeating again is taking the night bus. If you guys are out late past midnight, or if you cannot grab one of the night tubes that do run right now, which is like the Victoria line or the Central line or the Piccadilly. I don't live on any of those tube lines, but if you do live on those, you can obviously take the night tube. But the night bus, little bit sus, little bit strange. I don't know. I wouldn't personally take it again. I normally take Ubers now when I go home at night, but yeah, just a mistake I made when I first moved to London was thinking the night bus was totally okay when I guess it is, but just not for me. And finally, the fifth mistake that I made as an American abroad in London is not being a tourist often enough in my own beautiful city of London. So when you start living somewhere, especially after the 6 years that I have lived in London, you start becoming very, very complacent with the city. So you kind of stop being a tourist. You kind of stop seeing all the wonderful things that London has to offer, because you end up just saying, oh, I'll do it next weekend, or I'll do it when my friends are here, when my family comes to visit. But London has so much to offer, and I guess my biggest mistake is not taking advantage of that anymore on the weekends. I used to go out almost every single weekend when I first moved abroad, but nowadays I end up just watching Netflix on the couch or just chilling at home and not actually going out to see the beautiful city that I live in. After nearly 6 years of living in London, I have never actually been to the Tower of London. I've never been to the British Museum. I've not seen Greenwich Park. There's an endless list of places that I haven't been in London because honestly, I'm just like, oh, I'll get to it next weekend. And I'm so tired from traveling abroad, or I'm too tired from all these other things that I don't actually take advantage of my weekends of living in London. So if you are moving abroad or you are moving to London, I would say just be a tourist in your own city. Don't take it for granted that you live in a wonderful city like London, and you should definitely go out and explore. There is literally something new to explore in London every single weekend. And I also made the mistake of focusing on going abroad so much when I first moved here. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so easy to travel abroad when you live in London. You can be in Europe within a matter of hours. You can just get on a flight really quickly. But there is just so much to explore inside of London, around London, in the UK. And I think this last year and the pandemic and just kind of being stuck at home has made me really explore things in London. I even took a bike ride throughout London. I never would have done that before. I've done a vlog on that. If you guys want to check it out, I'll link it up in the cards right now. But when you do move abroad, just remember to continue to be a tourist in your own city, because it is a beautiful place. And guess what? You are lucky enough to live here in London or anywhere else that you are living in the world. Right, guys, those are the top 5 mistakes I made since moving to London. And if you guys have made any mistakes since moving abroad or in the process of moving abroad, I would love to know, and I would love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. If you guys enjoy my tips and tricks about being an American abroad or living abroad, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up so I know to create more content like this for you guys. And don't forget to smash that subscribe button and be a part of my YouTube family, because I upload new videos every single week about my life abroad. Right, guys, I hope you guys are having an amazing day wherever you are in the world, and I hope to catch you guys in my next video. Bye!